quiet farm surrounded by open fields and an old wooden barn, a mother duck was carefully preparing her nest. Among dry straw and soft feathers, she guarded 6 eggs. 5 were white and round, and 1 was larger and slightly greyish. She didn't see any difference between them. To the mother, they were all promises of life. As spring ripened, the nest began to move. One of the white eggs cracked, then another and another. In a short time, 5 yellow ducklings, fluffy and noisy, tumbled out, peeping loudly and snuggling into their mother's wings. The nest turned into a little festival. Only the grey eggs stayed still, heavy, taking longer than all the others. At last, the grey shell broke too. The last duckling came out slowly, a bit clumsy, breathing in the world for the very first time. He wasn't yellow like his brothers. He was completely grey, with uneven little feathers and a body that felt too long to be called cute. The others stopped for a moment and stared in silence. The mother pulled him closer with care, as if to say without a single word that this was his place too. The next days showed that the world didn't see it that way. In the yard, the hens whispered with their eyes. The geese watched him with suspicion, and even some of the yellow ducklings slipped away when he came too close. When everyone ran to play in the puddle or scratch at the ground, the grey duckling came behind, trying to join in. Many times, all it took was one more step for the group to open up, just enough to leave a gap where he never quite fit. At night, the contrast felt even harsher. In the barn, the high nest perched on top of hay bales was a warm, crowded pile of yellow feathers and the protective mother. On the cold ground, among scattered straw, the grey duckling curled up all alone. He didn't understand why it was so hard to be accepted, but he felt, deep down, that this place people called home felt less and less like his. After many nights listening only to his own thoughts, he made a quiet decision. On a dawn when the barn was asleep, he stood up, looked one last time at the nest where he had never really fit, and walked toward a small gap in the wooden wall. On the other side, there was nothing but darkness, a dirt road and a cold wind. Even so, he slipped through. He would rather face the unknown than keep feeling like a problem in the one place where he should have found love. The road greeted him with dust, stones, and long stretches of loneliness. A dog barked behind a fence. A distant farmer shouted something into the air, and the grey duckling ran with his heart racing, not even sure who or what he was running from. Rain arrived suddenly, soaking the path. Mud clung to his little orange feet. His tired body ached, but he kept going. At one point, he found a crooked little house where a hen and a cat lived. For a moment, he thought maybe he had finally found shelter. But cold, impatient looks quickly showed that to them, he was nothing more than a useless intruder. There was no place for him there either. So he went on. He walked through green fields under the sun, then through places where the leaves turned golden and fell, covering the ground like a giant carpet. The world changed color and smell, and he changed on the inside, carrying invisible scars. One day, after a long time walking, he found himself standing before a great lake. The water stretched out wide, shining under the sky, more beautiful than any puddle on the farm. And on that water, he saw something he had never seen before. Large white birds with long necks and movements so smooth they looked like they were drawing on the surface. They were swans. From behind the tall grass, the grey duckling watched, too afraid to get any closer. From where he stood, all he could see was perfection. White feathers, elegant reflections, a calm so complete it didn't seem to have room for someone like him. Even so, he chose to stay. If he couldn't belong to that world, at least he could watch something beautiful from a distance. Something that reminded him that there was still grace in life. Time passed, and the warmth faded away. The wind grew sharp, the trees lost their leaves, and the lake began to freeze along the edges. The grey duckling endured the cold as best he could, huddled in a small corner near the reeds, trying to shield himself from the falling snow and the weight of loneliness. Still, he did not abandon the lake. In the distance, he kept seeing the swans gathered over the patch of water that stayed open. In the middle of so much ice, they looked like living lights drifting on the surface. Winter was long, but no winter lasts forever. One day, the ice began to crack. The water started to move again, and life slowly picked up its rhythm. The grey duckling wasn't so small anymore. His body was bigger, his neck longer, his wings stronger. On a certain spring morning, by the lake's edge, standing on a smooth stone, he felt something different. It was as if his own body were answering the call of the new season. His grey feathers began to fall away little by little, and beneath them, smooth, bright feathers appeared. His chest seemed to glow. His neck stretched into a graceful curve, and his body took on a new shape. When he looked at the water next to the stone, he saw a reflection he didn't recognize at first. Where there had once been a clumsy, sad little duckling, there was now a young white swan, with shining feathers, a long neck, deep eyes, and a bright orange bill marked with black at the base. It took him a while to realize that image was his own. Carefully, the young swan slipped into the water. Every movement felt different now, stronger, more natural. As he glided across the lake and approached the group of adult swans he had always admired from afar, his heart tightened, remembering all the times he had been pushed away. But this time, no one shoved him aside. The swans simply opened space, sliding gently around him, the way you do when you recognize someone who belongs. On the calm surface of the lake, he saw his white body mixed in with the shapes of the other swans. There was no clash, no oddness. He was not a lost duckling trying to be like them. He was one of them. The beauty he had always seen in the others was living in him too. It had just taken longer to appear. As the sun began to set, tinting the lake with gold and pink, the group rose into the air. Powerful wing beats, splashes on the water, and soon the sky was full of white silhouettes. The young swan rose with them, feeling the wind run through his feathers and the world grow smaller below. For the first time in his life, he didn't feel too heavy, too wrong, or too late. He felt just right. Far down below, the farm that once rejected him would be nothing more than a tiny dot in the map of the world. But what mattered even more than that was what he had discovered about himself. He had never been wrong. He had simply been a swan growing up in the wrong place. The moral of the story is simple and deep. Not every difference is a flaw, and not every delay is a failure. Some lives bloom more slowly, some hearts seem strange at the beginning, and some stories start with rejection and loneliness. But that doesn't decide how they end. The ugly duckling was never truly ugly. He was a swan all along, just growing at a different pace. When someone feels out of place, strange, or not good enough, they can remember this. True worth doesn't depend on the eyes of those who judge, but on the truth that sooner or later appears in the mirror of life. And sometimes what the world calls ugly is really just beauty that hasn't finished being born yet.